Section 10 of State of the Union Addresses by United States Presidents, 1923 through 1932. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Mike Manalakis. Calvin Coolidge, December 4th, 1928. Part 2. Main Battleship Memorial. When I attended the Pan American Conference at Havana, the president of Cuba showed me a marble statue made from the original memorial that was overturned by a storm after it was erected on the Cuban shore to the memory of the men who perished in the destruction of the battleship Maine. As a testimony of friendship and appreciation of the Cuban government and people, he most generously offered to present this to the United States, and I assured him of my pleasure in accepting it. There is no location in the White House for placing so large and heavy a structure, and I therefore urged the Congress to provide by law for some locality where it can be set up. Railroads. In previous annual messages, I have suggested the enactment of laws to promote railroad consolidation with the view of increasing the efficiency of transportation and lessening its cost to the public. While consolidations can and should be made under the present law until it is changed, yet the provisions of the Act of 1920 have not been found fully adequate to meet the needs of other methods of consolidation. Amendments designed to remedy these defects have been considered at length by the respective committees of Congress, and a bill was reported out late in the last session, which I understand has the approval in principle of the Interstate Commerce Commission. It is to be hoped that this legislation may be enacted at an early date. Experience has shown that the interstate commerce law requires definition and clarification in several other respects, some of which have been pointed out by the Interstate Commerce Commission in its annual reports to the Congress. It will promote the public interest to have the Congress give early consideration to the recommendations there made. Merchant Marine. The cost of maintaining the United States government merchant fleet has been steadily reduced. We have established American flag lines in foreign trade where they had never before existed, as a means of promoting commerce and as a naval auxiliary. There have been sold to private American capital for operation within the past few years 14 of these lines, which, under the encouragement of the recent legislation passed by the Congress, give promise of continued successful operation. Additional legislation from time to time may be necessary to promote future advancement under private control. Through the cooperation of the Post Office Department and the Shipping Board, long-term contracts are being made with American steamship lines for carrying mail, which already promise the construction of 15 to 20 new vessels and the gradual reestablishment of the American merchant marine as a private enterprise. No action of the national government has been so beneficial to our shipping. The cost is being absorbed to a considerable extent by the disposal of unprofitable lines operated by the Shipping Board, for which the new law has made a market. Meanwhile, it should be our policy to maintain necessary strategic lines under the government operation until they can be transferred to private capital. Inter-American Highway. In my message last year, I expressed the view that we should lend our encouragement for more good roads to all the principal points on this hemisphere south of the Rio Grande. My view has not changed. The Pan American Union has recently endorsed it. In some of the countries to the south, a great deal of progress is being made in road building. In others, engineering features are often exacting and financing difficult. As those countries enter upon programs for road building, we should be ready to contribute from our abundant experience to make their task easier of accomplishment. I prefer not to go into civil life to accomplish this end. We already furnish military and naval advisors, and following this precedent, we could draw competent men from these same sources and from the Department of Agriculture. We should provide our southern neighbors, if they request it, with such engineer advisors for the construction of roads and bridges. Private interests should look with favor upon all reasonable loans sought by these countries to open main lines of travel. Such assistance should be given especially to any project for a highway designed to connect all the countries on this hemisphere and thus facilitate intercourse and closer relations among them. Airmail service. The friendly relations and the extensive commercial intercourse with the Western Hemisphere to the south of us are being further cemented by the establishment and extension of airmail routes. We shall soon have one from Key West, Florida, over Cuba, Haiti, and Santo Domingo, to San Juan, Puerto Rico, where it will connect with another route to Trinidad. There will be another route from Key West to the Canal Zone, where connection will be made with a route across the northern coast of South America to Paramaribo. This will give us a circle around the Caribbean under our own control. Additional connections will be made at Colon, with a route running down the west coast of South America as far as Concepcion, Chile, and with the French airmail at Paramaribo running down the eastern coast of South America. The air service already spans our continent, with laterals running to Mexico and Canada, and covering a daily flight of over 28,000 miles with an average cargo of 15,000 pounds. Waterways. Our river and harbor improvements are proceeding with vigor. In the past few years, we have increased the appropriation for this regular work $28 million, besides what is to be expended on flood control. The total appropriation for this year was over $91 million. The Ohio River is almost ready for opening. Work on the Missouri and other rivers is underway. In accordance with the Mississippi flood law, Army engineers are making investigations and surveys on other streams throughout the country with a view to flood control, navigation, water power, and irrigation. Our barrier lines are being operated under generous appropriations, and negotiations are developing relative to the St. Lawrence waterway. To secure the largest benefits from all these waterways, joint rates must be established with the railroads, preferably by agreement, but otherwise as a result of congressional action. We have recently passed several river and harbor bills. The work ordered by the Congress, not yet completed, will cost about $243 million, besides the hundreds of millions to be spent on the Mississippi floodway. Until we can see our way out of this expense, no further river and harbor legislation should be passed, as expenditures to put it into effect would be 4 or 5 years away. Irrigation of arid lands. For many years, the federal government has been committed to the wise policy of reclamation and irrigation. While it has met with some failures due to unwise selection of projects and lack of thorough soil surveys, so that they could not be placed on a sound business basis, on the whole the service has been of such incalculable benefit in so many states that no one would advocate its abandonment. The program to which we are already committed, providing for the construction of new projects authorized by Congress and the completion of old projects, will tax the resources of the Reclamation Fund over a period of years. The high cost of improving and equipping farms adds to the difficulty of securing settlers for vacant farms on federal projects. Readjustments authorized by the Reclamation Relief Act of May 25, 1926, have given more favorable terms of repayment to settlers. These new financial arrangements and the general prosperity on irrigation projects have resulted in increased collections by the Department of the Interior of charges due to the Reclamation Fund. Nevertheless, the demand for still smaller yearly payments on some projects continues. These conditions should have consideration in connection with any proposed new projects. Colorado River. For several years, the Congress has considered the erection of a dam on the Colorado River for flood control, irrigation, and domestic water purposes, all of which may properly be considered as government functions. There would be an incidental creation of water power which could be used for generating electricity. As private enterprise can very well fill this field, there is no need for the government to go into it. It is unfortunate that the states interested in this water have been unable to agree among themselves. Nevertheless, any legislation should give every possible safeguard to the present and prospective rights of each of them. The Congress will have before it the detailed report of a special board appointed to consider the engineering and economic feasibility of this project. From the short summary which I have seen of it, I judge they consider the engineering problems can be met at somewhat increased cost over previous estimates. They prefer the Black Canyon site. On the economic features, they are not so clear and appear to base their conclusions on many conditions which cannot be established with certainty. So far as I can judge, however, from the summary, their conclusions appear sufficiently favorable, so that I feel warranted in recommending a measure which will protect the rights of the states, discharge the necessary government functions, and leave the electrical field to private enterprise. Muscle Shoals. The development of other methods of producing nitrates will probably render this plant less important for that purpose than formerly. But we have it, and I am told it still provides a practical method of making nitrates for national defense and farm fertilizers. By dividing property into its two component parts of power and nitrate plants, it would be possible to dispose of the power, reserving the right to any concern that wished to make nitrates to use any power that might be needed for that purpose. Such a disposition of the power plant can be made that will return in rental about $2 million per year. If the Congress would grant the Secretary of War authority to lease the nitrate plant on such terms as would ensure the largest production of nitrates, the entire property could begin to function. Such a division, I am aware, has never seemed to appeal to the Congress. I should also gladly approve a bill granting authority to lease the entire property for the production of nitrates. I wish to avoid building another dam at public expense. Future operators should provide for that themselves. But if they were to be required to repay the cost of such dam with the prevailing commercial rates for interest, this difficulty will be considerably lessened. Nor do I think this property should be made a vehicle for putting the United States government indiscriminately into the private and retail field of power distribution and nitrate sales. Conservation. The practical application of economy to the resources of the country calls for conservation. This does not mean that every resource should not be developed to its full degree, but it means that none of them should be wasted. We have a conservation board working on our oil problem. This is of the utmost importance to the future well-being of our people in this age of oil-burning engines and the general application of gasoline to transportation. The Secretary of the Interior should not be compelled to lease oil lands of the Osage Indians when the market is depressed and the future supply is in jeopardy. While the area of lands remaining in public ownership is small, compared with the vast area in private ownership, the natural resources of those in public ownership are of immense present and future value. This is particularly true as to minerals and water power. The proper bureaus have been classifying these resources to the end that they may be conserved. Appropriate estimates are being submitted in the budget for the further prosecution of this important work. Immigration. The policy of restrictive immigration should be maintained. Authority should be granted the Secretary of Labor to give immediate preference to learned professions and experts essential to new industries. The reuniting of families should be expedited. Our immigration and naturalization laws might well be codified. Wage earner. In its economic life, our country has rejected the long-accepted law of a limitation of the wage fund, which led to pessimism and despair because it was the doctrine of perpetual poverty, and has substituted for it the American conception that the only limit to profits and wages is production, which is the doctrine of optimism and hope, because it leads to prosperity. Here and there, the councils of labor are still darkened by the theory that only by limiting individual production can there be any assurance of permanent employment for increasing numbers. But in general, management and wage earner alike have become emancipated from this doom and have entered a new era in industrial thought which has unleashed the productive capacity of the individual worker with an increasing scale of wages and profits, the end of which is not yet. The application of this theory accounts for our widening distribution of wealth. No discovery ever did more to increase the happiness and prosperity of the people. Since 1922, increasing production has increased wages in general 12.9%, while in certain selected trades they have run as high as 34.9% and 38%. Even in the boot and shoe shops, the increase is over 5%, and in woolen mills 8.4%, although these industries have not prospered like others. As the rise in living costs in this period is negligible, these figures represent real wage increases. The cause of constructive economy requires that the government should cooperate with private interests to eliminate the waste arising from industrial accidents. This item, with all that has been done to reduce it, still reaches enormous proportions with great suffering to the workmen and great loss to the country. Women and children. The federal government should continue its solicitous care for the 8,500,000 women wage earners and its efforts in behalf of public health, which is reducing infant mortality and improving the bodily and mental conditions of our citizens. Civil service. The most marked change made in the civil service of the government in the past 8 years relates to the increase in salaries. The Board of Actuaries on the Retirement Act shows by its report that July 1st, 1921, the average salary of the 330,047 employees subject to the Act was $1,307, while on June 30th, 1927, the average salary of the corresponding 405,263 was $1,969. This was an increase in 6 years of nearly 53%. On top of this was the generous increase made at the last session of the Congress, generally applicable to federal employees, and another bill increasing the pay in certain branches of the Postal Service beyond the large increase which was made 3 years ago. This raised the average level from $1,969 to $2,092, making an increase in 7 years of over 63%. While it is well known that in the upper brackets the pay in the federal service is much smaller than in private employment, in the lower brackets, ranging well up over $3,000, it is much higher. It is higher not only in actual money paid, but in privileges granted, a vacation of 30 actual working days, or 5 weeks each year, with additional time running in some departments as high as 30 days for sick leave, and the generous provisions of the Retirement Act. No other body of public servants ever occupied such a fortunate position. Education. Through the Bureau of Education of the Department of the Interior, the federal government, acting in an informative and advisory capacity, has rendered valuable service. While this province belongs peculiarly to the states, yet the promotion of education and efficiency in educational methods is a general responsibility of the federal government. A survey of Negro colleges and universities in the United States has just been completed by the Bureau of Education through funds provided by the institutions themselves and through private sources. The present status of Negro higher education was determined and recommendations were made for its advancement. This was one of the numerous cooperative undertakings of the Bureau. Following the invitation of the Association of Land-Grant Colleges and Universities, the Bureau of Education now has underway the survey of agricultural colleges, authorized by Congress. The purpose of the survey is to ascertain the accomplishments, the status, and the future objectives of this type of educational training. It is now proposed to undertake a survey of secondary schools, which educators insist is timely and essential. Public buildings. We have laid out a public building program for the District of Columbia and the country at large, running into hundreds of millions of dollars. 3 important structures and 1 annex are already underway, and 1 addition has been completed in the city of Washington. In the country, sites have been acquired, many buildings are on course of construction, and some are already completed. Plans for all this work are being prepared in order that it may be carried forward as rapidly as possible. This is the greatest building program ever assumed by this nation. It contemplates structures of utility and of beauty. When it reaches completion, the people will be well served, and the federal city will be supplied with the most beautiful and stately public buildings which adorn any capital in the world. The American Indian. The administration of Indian Affairs has been receiving intensive study for several years. The Department of the Interior has been able to provide better supervision of health, education, and industrial advancement of this native race through additional funds provided by the Congress. The present cooperative arrangement existing between the Bureau of Indian Affairs and the Public Health Service should be extended. The government's responsibility to the American Indian has been acknowledged by annual increases in appropriations to fulfill its obligations to them and to hasten the time when federal supervision of their affairs may be properly and safely terminated. The movement in Congress and in some of the state legislatures for extending responsibility in Indian affairs to states should be encouraged. A complete participation by the Indian in our economic life is the end to be desired. The Negro. For 65 years now, our Negro population has been under the peculiar care and solicitude of the national government. The progress which they have made in education and the professions, in wealth and in the arts of civilization, affords one of the most remarkable incidents in this period of world history. They have demonstrated their ability to partake of the advantages of our institutions and to benefit by a free and more independent existence. Whatever doubt there may have been of their capacity to assume the status granted to them by the Constitution of this Union is being rapidly dissipated. Their cooperation in the life of the nation is constantly enlarging. Exploiting the Negro problem for political ends is being abandoned, and their protection is being increased by those states in which their percentage of population is largest. Every encouragement should be extended for the development of the race. The colored people have been the victims of the crime of lynching, which has in late years somewhat decreased. Some parts of the South already have wholesome laws for its restraint and punishment. Their example might well be followed by other states and by such immediate remedial legislation as the federal government can extend under the Constitution. Philippine Islands. Under the guidance of Governor General Stimson, the economic and political conditions of the Philippine Islands have been raised to a standard never before surpassed. The cooperation between his administration and the people of the islands is complete and harmonious. It would be an advantage if relief from double taxation could be granted by the Congress to our citizens doing business in the islands. Puerto Rico. Due to the terrific storm that swept Puerto Rico last September, the people of that island suffered large losses. The Red Cross and the War Department went to their rescue. The property loss is being retrieved. Sugar, tobacco, citrus fruit, and coffee all suffered damage. The first three can largely look after themselves. The coffee growers will need some assistance, which should be extended strictly on a business basis and only after most careful investigation. The people of Puerto Rico are not asking for charity. Department of Justice. It is desirable that all the legal activities of the government be consolidated under the supervision of the Attorney General. In 1870, it was felt necessary to create the Department of Justice for this purpose. During the intervening period, either through legislation, creating law officers, or departmental action, additional legal positions not under the supervision of the Attorney General have been provided until there are now over 900. Such a condition is as harmful to the interest of the government now as it was in 1870, and should be corrected by appropriate legislation. Special Government Counsel. In order to prosecute the oil cases, I suggested, and the Congress enacted, a law providing for the appointment of 2 special counsel. They have pursued their work with signal ability, recovering all the leased lands besides nearly $30 million in money and nearly $17 million in other property. They find themselves hampered by a statute, which the Attorney General construes as applying to them, prohibiting their appearing for private clients before any department. For this reason, one has been compelled to resign. No good result is secured by the application of this rule to these counsel, and as Mr. Roberts has consented to take reappointment if the rule is abrogated, I recommend the passage of an amendment to the law creating their office, exempting them from the general rule against taking other cases involving the government. Prohibition. The country has duly adopted the 18th Amendment. Those who object to it have the right to advocate its modification or repeal. Meantime, it is binding upon the national and state governments and all our inhabitants. The Federal Enforcement Bureau is making every effort to prevent violations, especially through smuggling, manufacture, and transportation, and to prosecute generally all violations for which it can secure evidence. It is bound to continue this policy. Under the terms of the Constitution, however, the obligation is equally on the states to exercise the power which they have through the executive, legislative, judicial, and police branches of their governments in behalf of enforcement. The federal government is doing and will continue to do all it can in this direction and is entitled to the active cooperation of the states. Conclusion. The country is in the midst of an era of prosperity more extensive and of peace more permanent than it has ever before experienced. But having reached this position, we should not fail to comprehend that it can easily be lost. It needs more effort for its support than the less exalted places of the world. We shall not be permitted to take our ease, but shall continue to be required to spend our days in unremitting toil. The actions of the government must command the confidence of the country. Without this, our prosperity would be lost. We must extend to other countries the largest measure of generosity, moderation, and patience. In addition to dealing justly, we can well afford to walk humbly. The end of government is to keep open the opportunity for a more abundant life. Peace and prosperity are not finalities, they are only methods. It is too easy under their influence for a nation to become selfish and degenerate. This test has come to the United States. Our country has been provided with the resources with which it can enlarge its intellectual, moral, and spiritual life. The issue is in the hands of the people. Our faith in man and God is the justification for the belief in our continuing success. End of section 10.